In the videos you watched about entering formulas into Excel, you learned that by placing a dollar sign in front of the letter and the number would create what is called an absolute reference. When you use the name of a cell in a formula, this also creates an absolute reference, so that when you use the fill function to fill in formulas, the reference to that cell doesn't change just like it would by adding the dollar signs. We'll come back to this concept in a bit. Now it is time to start calculating values of our loan principal. We want the following as headers: month, principal owed, interest, total owed, and less payment. So I have entered those values into row 7. The value of cell B8 should be equal to the principal, so after clicking in cell B8 to activate it, I will type an equal sign, then click on the cell that has my principal in it and hit enter. Cell B8 should now display 200,000. To calculate the interest owed, I want to multiply the principal owed by the periodic rate. So in cell C8, I will type an equal sign, then click on the cell that has the principal owed, an asterisk to tell Excel I want to multiply, then click on the periodic rate and hit enter. My interest owed for this month is $833.33. To calculate the total amount owed, again, I need to hit an equal sign to tell Excel that I want to calculate something. I'm going to click on the principal owed for this month and add to it the interest and hit enter. This is now my total amount owed for the month. To calculate the values in the less payment column, we want to subtract the monthly payment from the total amount owed. So now in cell E8, I will type an equal sign, click on the total owed, and subtract my payment, which is in cell B4, and hit enter. Beginning the second month, the principal is the same as the total owed from last month, so in cell B9, type an equal sign, and then click on cell E8 to carry over that amount to the following month. Now let's fill in cells C9 to E9 by highlighting C8, D8, and E8. After selecting those cells, I can fill down to the next row by positioning my cursor over the lower right-hand corner of the cells I wish to copy. The cursor will turn into a small black plus sign. Now click and drag down to the next row. Row 9 should now be filled with the appropriate values. Now, you may have wondered why I didn't name any of my cells in row 8 when I typed in the formulas. This is because if I named those cells, then the fill function wouldn't work properly. Remember when I said that naming a cell creates an absolute reference? If I named cells in row 8, that would mean those values would be static values, which I do not want. For the values in row 9, I want relative references so that Excel detects the pattern of references and uses that pattern to create the formula. So for instance, if I look in cell E9, Excel detected that I wanted to calculate that value by subtracting the payment, which is a static value, from the cell to the left, which is a relative value. Excel will change that relative reference accordingly when I use the fill function so that the payment is always being subtracted from the total amount I owe, which is a value that changes each month. Next, we want the leftmost column to count the number of payments made. Enter a 1 in cell A8 and a 2 in cell A9. Highlight both of these values and then use the fill function to fill down. Excel detects that you are adding the value 1 to the value above it, so it will fill in those values for you. Fill up to month 360, which is cell A367. Since I filled down too far, I'm just going to highlight the cells that I don't want and hit delete. 360 months is a period equivalent to 30 years. After scrolling back up to the top of the screen, I can see I have the calculations for months 1 and months 2. I can click in any cell to see where the value in that cell came from. So if you recall, in cell B8, this was just the principal owed, so I can look up in my formula field and see that cell B8 is equal to the principal. I can see how my interest was calculated, the total owed is calculated, and the less payment is calculated. And again, you'll notice for those cells that used relative cell referencing, the values changed after I filled the function. So here in cell E8, I can look at the formula and see that that was the value D8 minus the payment. If I go down to the next box, I can see that the calculation is now being made from D9 minus the payment. But notice how the payment amount is always $1,200. It does not change relative to how I fill in the function with using Excel's fill function. It automatically fills it in as a static value rather than a relative one. In our next video, I will show you how to complete the rest of these values, and so we can determine how much interest is paid over the life of the loan.